And welcome once again to EWTN's Bookmark. I am Doug Keck, your host. Very special friend and guest, Teresa Tomeo from radio and TV. And her book is Intimate Graces, published by Ave Maria Press and available at the EWTN Religious Catalog, EWTNRC.com. Always great to have you here.
For having me.
Either usually on camera or you're behind the microphone on a regular basis. We get to talk on Mondays on radio. And the subtitle of this is How Practicing the Works of Mercy Brings Out the Best in Marriage. Now, I have to be clear that you're a co-author.
That's right.
With some fellow by the name of Dominic Pastore, is that correct?
Yes, Pastore, yes.
Now, does your husband know about him?
That is my husband.
That is your
Thanks be to
husband.
God.
So Pastore is your married name?
It is.
Oh.
It is.
Now, is Tomeo your name?
Tomeo is actually my mother's maiden name that I use on the air. My maiden name is a very long Italian name from southern Italy.
So this is your media name?
Right. Tomeo, and I'm half Tomeo.
Okay.
And the other half is Squillace, which is from the Reggio Calabria area. And I thought, Tomeo is still
I can't figure out why you
Italian.
decided to change that.
And much easier to pronounce. So.
Okay, great. Yeah. So the two of you put this together now. Dominic's a deacon now, right?
Yes, he is. 3 years.
Okay, so and you talk about some of those experiences as well. Did that have an impact on your interest in writing about marriage? The fact that you're a couple and he's a deacon now?
Yeah, it did. But it's interesting. This wasn't even our idea. We have spoken together and given our testimony, as you know, our reversion story to the church. But we were approached about 2.5 years ago by our editor, Heidi Hess-Saxton. We were at the Catholic Marketing Network, and she said, I've got this great idea for a book. What do you think about applying the corporal and spiritual works of mercy to marriage? And to tell you the truth, Doug, I never thought about it. It just never crossed my mind.
Most people don't know what they are
Exactly,
anyway.
we've forgotten them. It's something we learned in Catholic grade school, right?
Yeah.
And I said, I never even thought about that. And she said, but I want you to co-write the book with your husband. And so I went back and I talked to Dominic, and he said, well, I've never written a book before, but I write homilies all the time. And I guess, we love to talk about marriage and to help married couples. So that's how the book came about. And once we sat down to write it, it really made a lot of sense, because when you go through the corporal and spiritual works of mercy, you can really see how the different areas can apply to a marriage, especially in this day and age when so many marriages are struggling.
Right, especially today. Now, in the beginning here, you have a lot of great people making comments. The Alexanders, obviously, from the Alexander House, there's several series on EWTN having to do with marriage and are involved with that. And I know you've done some work with them on the side or on a regular basis anyway. But also, and there's Reverend Leo Patalinghug of all people. So
from EWTN
So he's
as well.
always into marriage and cooking there at the same time. But I thought this was interesting. Our great friend, Archbishop Charles J. Chaput of Archbishop of Philadelphia, a great man, a great member of our board. Teresa Tomeo and Dominic Pastore have written an ingenious, engaging, wonderfully readable set of reflections on married life. Why do you think he said ingenious?
I think because of the idea of applying the corporal and spiritual works of mercy to a marriage, which has never really been done before. And again, I give all credit to our editor for it, but he's someone, I think, too, who really appreciates the practicality in being able to apply our faith practically to our lives. And the way we work through the different works of mercy, we do give a lot of really good practical suggestions. So I think that's what he was referring.
Now, in the foreword that the Alexanders put together for the book, they mentioned the statistic around 60% mark. In addition, this has to do with ending in divorce, but usually that is higher, that number, because it includes multiple marriages in the statistics, but still, it's a very bad statistic. Some experts estimate, and this I thought was even more important, even among those who remain married, only 10 or 12% can be characterized as being truly happy. Now, do you think that was the case? It always was in the past, but people could never think of getting divorced because of the culture, because women couldn't raise the kids on their own, etc. They were kind of held bound together, the couples, and that they were only 10 or 12% happy? Or do you think it actually has gotten worse in the sense of the happiness?
I think it's gotten worse because of the culture. I think when our parents and grandparents were married, that they really believed in the institution of marriage. It meant something. The sacrament of marriage meant something. It meant something to the culture. The culture was behind us in the whole, I don't want to say marriage business, but marriage ministry more appropriately, where they believed in it, and it was something that was near and dear to them, that they took very seriously. And I think they were a lot better at happiness because they lived lives lives that were more simple. You know, if you look at our culture today, we're so materialistic, we're so, you know, consumeristic, we're always trying to keep up with the Joneses. And you know my story, you know the Alexander story, and that was a big part of our problem. My husband and I were both yuppies, just like the Alexanders, making a lot of money and thinking, well, this is the way you're supposed to be happy. You get married, you meet a great guy, you get married, you have success, and then you just go off into the sunset.
What they used to call a marriage encounter, married singles.
Married singles, and that's exactly what we did, and we thought that that was okay because that's what everybody else was doing.
Right, because at the end of the day, though you're together as a couple, you still have to hold on to who you are.
Right, right, and that was the idea that the culture gave us, and God forbid you should lose your identity in someone else. So I think it's much worse today, and especially I think in people our age, where they've just gotten caught up in the world and following the ways of the world versus looking at what it means to commit and to sacrifice. Not that people should stay in obviously abusive relationships or things that are going to be harmful to them, but so many people that I know who are divorced walk away for, you know, well, you know, I just wasn't happy anymore. Well, what does that mean? We're not happy every single day. We're not perfectly, but the real joy and the real happiness has to be much deeper. Otherwise, you're going to be going from thing to thing to thing in order to find that happiness.
Well, if leaving a reasonably good marriage because one is bored was a good step to make happiness, well, then the remarriages have a higher rate of failure. So the likelihood that you're going to leave this relationship and get a better relationship that's going to work better for you is actually statistically,
yeah. I mean, you're heading down the same path.
It's going to get worse. Most likely. Now, they also said in the forward, marriage is like a plant. It's either growing or it's dying. The only thing certain, it doesn't remain stagnant. Do you think also even some of the young people, even young good Catholics who may be, you know, highly motivated and they want to do and have the marriage, and you have that kind of romance period, and they think, you know, they don't have to continue to work at it? And the fact, like this says there, it's never stagnant. It's always
who
changing.
hears about that?
Right.
I mean, when we got married, we went through, I think, 2 weekends of so-called pre-Cana, right? Pre-Cana training, so to speak. We met with the priest, we met with a couple, we took a multiple choice test, and you get married in the Catholic Church to make sure that you've received all the sacraments, that everything is copacetic, so you can, you know, sign the marriage license and all that. But after that, it's off to the races, and you're sent off, you know, out the door and said, you know, good luck, God bless you, and you come back for your kids to receive the sacraments. But where's the marriage enrichment? Where's the, you know, engaged couples prep also is still very weak. You're not given anything to go forward with. So how do you build a marriage?
Well, and I know even with the efforts that were made, I know Marriage Encounters, big effort coming out of the 60s and things like that, was there as well. But I know one of the difficulties that Marriage Encounter has run into over the years, and why not as many couples go, is because both spouses are working. And so the ability for people to get time off for a whole weekend to go away, because they don't live by their family, they don't have the extended family, and you've got 2 people trying to get off at the same time. The kids have got 25 different things they're signed up for, you know, soccer and whatever, volleyball over the weekend. So it becomes incredibly difficult for those people to step out and do that as well.
But how often do we hear about Marriage Encounter or Engaged Encounter or even Retrovi unless you're going through a crisis and a friend tells you about it? I still don't think there's enough promotion of those really good ministries at the parish level. And those things are really necessary in order for, especially Marriage Encounter, because it's not for troubled marriages, as you know. It's for making a marriage better. And what a great thing to do. We were encountered in 1994. And it made a huge difference to us, and we're big promoters of World Marriage Day, and it's an incredible
ministry. You actually talk about giving a talk at World Marriage Day, and that's what I was going to ask you. Everybody's got something. What does that mean?
Well, there's a little story behind that. When we were getting ready to give our testimony for the first time at World Marriage Day back in, I think it was 1999 or 2000, we were asked by a deacon friend of ours, Deacon Bob Ovies from the Archdiocese of Detroit, who's mentioned in that book, and our friends from World Marriage Day, Fran and Rich Walden, to do this talk. Well, being that I had was still in the secular media at the time, or was just leaving at the time, I was still pretty well known in the area. A friend of mine, a good Catholic friend who was a fellow anchor woman at the local ABC affiliate, called me up and said, you can't do this. You can't do this. And I said, what do you mean I can't do it? She goes, you're a public person. You're going to ruin your business, you know, profile. When you start your new ministry and your new business, people are not, you can't sit there and talk about all the stuff that happened to you and Dominic. And so I panicked. I panicked and I thought, okay, I can't do this because my whole career is going to be in a shambles. And I called up Deacon Bob, one of the organizers of the event, and I just vented to him. And this was about 2 hours before we were set to leave. And he said, you know what, hon, everybody's got something. He said, I guarantee you, when you and Dom share your testimony, that there are going to be couples whose lives are going to be changed. You could have heard a pin drop that day, Doug, when we gave our testimony. It was over 500 people. And so many men and women came up to us and thanked us, and we've been giving our testimony ever since.
And then what you realize later is that there's a lot of other people out there in a lot
Everybody
worse,
does have something,
and
a lot
many times
worse
in life's worse situation. You say,
Yeah.
Dominic and I not only share the good, bad, and ugly of our own marriage journey in this book, but we've also received input and great insights from other couples who've overcome a variety of different obstacles, big and small. And let's talk about the format then. It says, each chapter comes complete with a prayer, okay, reflection questions. In addition, there is a resource list at the end of the book. You also set it up in such a way that you each write your own section. So who determined that this was the way you wanted to lay out this book?
Well, we talked about it with our editor, and we thought it would be better to write it that way because Dominic and I are so different. We're complete opposites, and I think it's
He's
really
an engineer,
He's
right?
an engineer. He's very much more. I wouldn't say an introvert, but more reflective. I'm reflective, but he's a little bit more quiet and analytical. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. And I'm just kind of out there, as you know. I wear my heart on my sleeve, and I'm, you know. So I think to have those two different voices and to see how we each drew from the different works of mercy differently. A lot of people are saying that's really neat to hear the two different voices in each chapter.
Right, talking about the same situation from a different perspective.
Yeah. And then what we're suggesting too, and this was something we got from one of the couples who actually gave their testimony in the book, is that when you're reading it together as a couple, we recommend, okay, the wives, will read my part, and then the wives read the husband's part, and then vice versa, the husband read the wife's part, so they get the different voices as well.
Yeah, it's
together.
Almost a little like a marriage encounter exchanging.
Exactly, right. The dialogue that we used to do,
questions and stuff. Yeah. That's a great idea. You mentioned here right in the beginning in the first chapter, feed the hungry. Identify and respond to your partner's deepest longings. You say, at one point in our relationship years ago, my husband and I expressed similar feelings of disappointment and discouragement, a real emptiness and hunger. We weren't satisfied with our marriage because we didn't know what a Catholic marriage was supposed to be. You could say we were spiritually malnourished. What is it supposed to be?
It is supposed to be a place where you can really find true fulfillment in each other and in a relationship with God, and true happiness and deep joy. And so many people don't realize that. So many people, I think, go along to get along, and they don't understand that if you truly embrace the sacrament of marriage and what it means, and how being Christ for the other person and helping that other person get to heaven, which is what the whole sacrament is for, which I didn't find out until we actually came back to the church. I mean, go figure. That the way the sacrament is laid out and the way this gift of the sacrament is given to us through the church is really an amazing path to true happiness and fulfillment. And you really do receive more by giving and by laying down your life.
Right, and 100, as you got to do.
Absolutely.
It's all about self-giving. It's interesting here because what does it really mean to invite God into your marriage? Because that's how in the world does it translate in the nitty-gritty of real life? And somebody would say, tell me, what's the secret? And you go, quite frankly, it translates into a single word, self-sacrifice.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not into that.
Yeah. Well, but you know what? If you're not into it, then you're not going to be happy, period. Because I don't care if it's in a marriage, I don't care if it's at work, I don't care if it's in, trying to get skinnier, lose weight to get an advanced degree. We all have to sacrifice in some. Everybody is so willing to sacrifice in all those other areas, but when it comes to the marriage relationship, everybody sees it as such a threat.
Right. Now, what's a girly fort? I don't know if I've ever seen any of those.
A girly fort. Oh, you're going to talk about the little girly fort story. It's a fort that is for girls only. And I had that in my backyard when I was in grade school, and I had a sign up that said, no boys allowed. And it had little pink curtains and everything else. So are you going to tell the rest of the story?
No, I'm not going to tell the rest of the story. That's enough. I just wondered what it was. Also, did you actually end up with a DVD of The Karate Kid, or was that just a joke?
That was a joke. That was a joke. But Dominic wanted to share that story because it's interesting. When I first told him, and what we're referring to obviously is a neighborhood bully who he was a bully, and he actually did apologize. And later on, when we became adults, we actually kind of became friends. His parents still lived 2 doors down, but I ended up getting into quite a little, how we say, fist fight, and quite frankly beat the living daylights out of this kid because he was such the straw that broke the camel's back was when he tore down the girly fort. So the bottom line is,
it was like a Christmas story. When you
exactly.
just lost it, right?
But he was trying to say that the whole point there was when he first heard the story, when I told him the Sammy story, he thought it was just boys being boys, and then me losing my temper and my getting my Italian up because I had it. It was kind of a cute story. But then when he thought about it, he realized that I can't stand injustice. And this little boy, when he was roaming the streets, basically was really running ramshot over the whole neighborhood, and was out of control. And his parents had no interest in controlling his behavior. They thought, well, he's our son, he's not really doing anything bad, he's a popular kid. And he was really causing a lot of damage, and the tearing down the girly for it was the last straw.
Well, many times bullies smile in the adults' faces.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
exactly.
And they show they're true to the kids.
Yep. And I really believe that deep in my heart, I was upset about the injustice because he wasn't only picking on me, he was picking on other children in the neighborhood. And I do believe that that is one of the reasons why I'm so pro-life.
Continue to do what you do today, right?
Yeah. I'm very passionate.
Standing up for those who need defense,
absolutely.
Right?
And so Dominic was able to draw that out of that incident. And a lot of people are commenting on that because for him to look at it that way, I think is a different viewpoint and helps people understand how the husband can see a wife differently and more clearly through the works of mercy.
Right, and how in each other talking to the other we can clarify our understandings because you've been through so much together that you don't think about.
Right.
That you're just there.
Yeah.
You know, especially if you went out for about 3 years before you guys got married?
3 years we were engaged, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And, you know, so you have this long-term relationship and a long history even before you got married. Now, in Clothe This Naked, even if you decide to leave me, I won't let you leave God. Who said that?
My husband said that to me. Yeah, because we were on the verge of divorce, and we actually, as I say in the book, I think I mentioned it, we separated briefly twice, and that was me. I was dealing with a lot of issues, and he was back in the church at that point for about a year, and it didn't get better when he came back to the church. It actually got worse, and sometimes that's how things work.
You kind of said that it got worse.
Yeah, because that's when I think you have a big target on your back, because the devil knows that things are starting to go in God's direction versus his direction, and he doesn't like it, so he starts to stir things up. And I couldn't deal with Dominic's change because it made me feel, looking back now I realize this, there was a check in my spirit because he was trying to do his best living out the Catholic faith. He wasn't pushing it on me, he wasn't hitting me over the head with the catechism, but he was changing and he was living correctly.
And your sensitivity goes up. Who are you now?
Who are you? Now you're judging me.
Now you're going to be the big Catholic
exactly,
here, huh?
exactly. And so I couldn't handle it, and I left twice on 2 occasions for very short periods of time. But that's when he said to me, even if you leave me, I won't let you leave God. I want to make sure you get back into a relationship because you just can't go on living the way you were living.
Well, you were lucky.
Yeah,
very lucky.
Very blessed. Very blessed.
As you say. And at the end of the chapters, too, we talked about the reflection questions, things. You also have tips at there, and one in here, tips to protect the vulnerable heart. One of them is refuse to uncover a spouse to the outside world. What do you mean?
Well, I think we have to be protective of each other. We have to support each other, we have to be protective, and if you know a certain vulnerability in your spouse, to keep that between the two of you and to support that person and try to help them deal with that. Oftentimes, for example, I've seen this in public, this never happened with us, but I've seen other couples who are having troubles, and sometimes the way they get to each other or they build on those issues when there's angst and they're not working it out, is they tease each other about things that you can tell are very, very sensitive and that bother a person, and that's not a healthy thing to do. That's a very painful thing to do. So protect the person and love them enough and protect their vulnerability.
Right, exactly. Tips for sheltering the one you love kind of falls into that, but it's in the next chapter. And this one, have you fallen for the myth of quality time? I think we've heard that over and over again. People are starting to realize it doesn't make up for time. Right. But this is the one I was worried about with you. Make sure electronics aren't short-circuiting your marriage. I mean, your first book was Noise.
Right. And that's a real humbling thing for me because of what we do for a living. We're in the media, and I do a daily talk show, and I have to be on top of everything that's happening in the Catholic world, in the secular world, because we have news on my program, and I have to be able to tie things in that are happening in the world and in our country in a Catholic perspective. So I have to really pace myself and make sure that when I get done with the radio show, even though I'm still doing research for the show, what are my hours for work, how much time am I spending, and once Dominic gets home, then that's it. We're home together, we're having dinner. Now he may be doing something diaconate-wise, maybe he's writing a homily, and if that's the case, then I'll go and I'll pray. But we're much more focused on spending time together every single day and talking to each other every day because we know how that quality time, and that was probably one of the biggest fallacies that we had that led to our downfall, because we assumed that when I went on a different shift, when I started in TV news and I was working nights and he was working days, that we loved each other enough and everything would be fine and we'd see each other on the weekend. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
You can't build a marriage on a few hours together on a Saturday or a Sunday.
Yeah, especially when you're bumping into each other when you're both exhausted, you're both worn out, neither one has a total appreciation of what the other one's really going through
Right.
at that time, because they're not
Right.
seeing it. So there's an incredible lack of understanding
Mm-hmm.
that might normally be there if the two of you were spending more time together.
Yeah, and just I think back, and it's absolutely amazing, and it's all God that we survived what we did. I mean, seriously, when I think back, and every time I see Dominic on the altar, you know, serving, it's a miracle. What God can do when we allow him to come in. Sorry, I'm getting emotional.
Right.
What God can do when we allow him to come into our relationship is just overwhelming.
Right. And you alluded to this before. In the shelter for the homeless, you say, are you and your spouse in different places spiritually speaking? And as you indicated, to some degree, you got to be careful with that, right?
Yeah. Well, Dominic, as I said, came back to the church about a year before I did, and it's luckily I say it was luckily. It's obviously it was a godsend. When I lost my job and I hit rock bottom, I had no place to go but up, and that's when I started to look up and finally look to God. But one of the big things we talk about, because I know that you probably ran into this in your work in Marriage Encounter. If you're not equally yoked, it can cause some distance, it can cause some problems. So what we tell people is to, if you're the person who is ahead of your spouse in the faith, let's say like Dominic was, to continue to pray, to keep an open door, but don't push. Because everybody has to come to their relationship with God and in the church on their own. It's not our timing, it's God's timing. And so we have to be patient. And if it's the opposite situation, you just keep praying for the person. You just keep praying for them. And so it's just really important to be patient and to support them, but to be prayerful. Continue doing what you're doing, but don't constantly be in their face and saying, hey, read this book, or go to this Bible study, or come to me. Invite them to Mass, and that's pretty important. Obviously, we can't miss our weekly obligation. But sometimes they may even want to go. And so that's something that you have to, you know, constantly try to talk to them about, but not be too harsh about it. But remind them that it's important for them to get back into a relationship
And
with God and the
sometimes
church.
you can also be in a situation where one is streaming along and the other one catches fire and goes blowing past the other one. And sometimes there's even a reverse resentment of kind of like, oh, well, wait, you know, I was the good Catholic.
Well, it's interesting that you said that, because when Dominic was discerning the diaconate, I felt that right away, always, that he would make a great deacon, but he didn't think that about himself because he's more reserved. And he thought, well, to be a deacon, you have to be this fabulous speaker and you have to be able to, which isn't true. I mean, my husband, he's a fabulous homilist, and the grace of the ordination, the laying of the hands is a huge thing and has a huge impact on all men who are ordained. But you know, he was really taking his time with the diaconate discernment. I mean, he's an engineer, he's analytical. He takes 5 years to buy a shirt, as I say sometimes. And I'm like, come on, get on with it already. You're going to make a great deacon. But I had to back off because it was he had to come to the decision that this is what he felt God was calling him to do. And so I was kind of getting frustrated with him, and he was getting frustrated with me, because here I was, you know, taking off. Not that he was jealous, but he was like, well, wait a minute. I need to do this on my own. I have to pray. Don't push me too much. So yeah, it can cause friction, but I stepped back and we worked it out.
Yeah, and the other thing you talk about, which is a typical thing that he mentions in the book, that many times can cause issues in a relationship with husband and wife, is that men tend to want to solve problems and women tend to want to be listened to.
Right. It's the relational thing versus the practical thing. And we laugh about that because I'm trying to think of the author who did the book, The 7 or the 5 Love Languages. I'm trying to remember the author, but it's a very good book because it talks about how sometimes what we do is we love someone the way we want to be loved, but it's not the way our spouse wants to be loved. For example, Dominic is, because he's an engineer and he's very practical and he's very handy, the way he shows love to me is acts of service, which means he's great at doing the dishes. He irons better than I do. He does things around the house, which I now totally appreciate, which I didn't when we were first married. For me, it was just the opposite. I'm much more relationship, and I just want to relate. You know, I want to talk because I'm relational. So you have to understand those differences in the other person and appreciate them.
Right, and again, like you indicated, sometimes in that, and also to find out in other situations that maybe other people aren't doing all the things that you think they're doing for each other.
Right.
But you have some idea that this magically is happening. But that's great for because communication there, as we always say, Marriage Encounter, is so important because of where you're at in your relationship, where you are spiritually, and for you to stay on the same page, right? But the other thing you also talk about here is the idea that you need to quench your own thirst. What do you mean quench your own thirst?
Well, for me, there are certain ways that I quench that own faith desire in me differently than Dominic would. For example, I love to listen to a lot of really good Christian music. Sometimes I have, especially over the holidays, I'm always playing wonderful Christmas music, and I have favorite Christian music artists. For Dominic, he's much more quiet. He likes to go in his office and just do the hours or read a book or something. But I'm stimulated by visual things and by sound, and so that's the way I quench my own thirst. And everybody is on a different page, and you have to appreciate that.
Now, you're also working on a show, besides your radio show, you're actually here when we're doing this interview, taping Catholic View for Women. What can we look forward to in the new season?
Wow. Thank you for the opportunity, by the way, for expanding it to 26 episodes. We're going to be tackling a lot of the issues we're seeing in the culture. We look at the whole issue of mistaken identity with the transgender issue, and we actually interviewed Deacon Lampert, who's right here in the Diocese of Birmingham. He was up in Detroit for a conference put on by Courage. We have a couple of episodes with one of our own EWTN radio personalities, very popular priest, Father John Mercado, talking about the new evangelization. We're also talking about victims of the sexual revolution and helping women and men, because we have a lot of men who are watching us now, deal with the fallout of the sexual revolution. So a lot of heavy topics, but I think a lot of also interesting topics. We also talk to a mom who lost a son. We talk about the grieving process. So just a variety of things.
Right.
So.
And another book in the works?
Yes, actually I have one coming out from Word Among Us on saints. That will come out in June of 2016. And then I have a selfie book, which is going to be about looking inward seriously, as opposed to not just concentrating on yourself, but what does this whole selfie syndrome say about our society? So 2 coming out next year.
I'm sure we'll hear about them.
Yes,
I'm sure
I hope
you'll
so.
stop
I hope we'll
by.
be right back here.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank
Doug.
you, Teresa Tomeo, author, along with her husband Dominic, of Intimate Graces, How Practicing the Works of Mercy Brings Out the Best in Marriage. Highly recommended. Available through the EWTN Religious Catalog. Join us next time right here on Bookmark.